Hello and welcome to Deep In Pact, a proud member of the Duff Network where we dive deep into Arbow's most nocturnal work 5 years on. Coming up next is Elliot Diebold.
And that was Ruben Morehouse.
We're back for a new arc, Sine Die 14.1. Let's do it. It opens up with some nice familiar ground. Blake and his team basically discussing what it's like eating humans. So, good time.
Yeah, very relatable, everyday topic. I mean, interestingly, the chapter basically opens up with this small beat of Blake just sort of mentioning, my body is creaking and fighting against me. And obviously this is important because something we saw a lot, particularly, I think it was last arc, was this idea that Blake's body sort of fought him when he was not doing abyssy type things. So I guess the Abyss is a little pissed off with him that he's taking the time to shore himself up and he's not out there causing more carnage constantly. Which, like, talk about a shit boss, like...
Yeah, this is something I want to touch on, because later on Alistair seems to imply that the Abyss, wants Blake to take another trip downtown, and wasn't he basically just, like, completely enforcing the Abyss's will last arc? I'm a little surprised that the Abyss is unhappy with him.
I get the impression that it's a very different type of trip. I think... There's, like, the way Alistair phrases it is Hillsglade House is coming with you. I think there's a sense of the Abyss is lumping a lot of things on Blake and is going to try and use him as like a conduit to take everything down with him.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, that's sort of the vague idea I've gotten from how this chapter ends. But yeah, I don't know. This bit just jumped out to me and I was like, fuck you, Abyss. Like, you give the guy a second to put himself in a position where he can be at your whim more. Like, he's doing this for you. Well, he's not, but he kind of is. Yeah. So, the Abyss, kind of a dick.
Who would have thought? Before we get too much deeper into this chapter, let's touch on the arc title and how perfect of an arc title it is. Elliot, do you want to take this away?
Yeah, I actually sort of mentioned it last episode, but it was after we stopped recording, which was, not how recording works.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, Sine Die, the legal term is, for when you adjourn something with no date of resumption. So it's kind of putting it off indefinitely, sort of. But the literal translation from Latin is without a day, which is just perfect.
Yeah.
For what's about to happen. It's so good.
It's actually so perfect of an arc title that it actually makes me think, while both came across this legal term and was like, oh, I can base an arc around this.
Yeah, I mean, either that or like you could just see him like finding this term and just being like, holy fuck, jackpot.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Anyway, yeah, so this chapter really starts kind of in an interesting place. Like, it kind of goes a bit off the rails right from the get-go, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's this sense of like, this is what taking a breather looks like in Pact these days, is going around talking about eating people and goblin torture and looking for, new spines to shove in yourself and get out of the way, Evan. It's a nice way to sort of take a breather, do some character work, but also Pact is still a really fucked up world, and so we're still sort of, it's never just like, and then they went back home and had some nice hot cocoa and talked about life in the universe. This is sort of as relaxed as it gets here.
Yeah, Blake's idea of rejuvenating himself, back in Arc 4 was hanging out with his friends, and now it's eating the arm bones of a corpse that's been tortured. So things have gone a bit downhill, I think. Let's pull out a line here where Evan is kind of not being, Blake and Green Eyes don't want Evan to see this man that's been tortured to death by a goblin, and Evan says, "You're not letting me see this? You know the kind of horrible gunk I've seen? Old Gobby McNail face back there, people dying, I bit a man's eye. You're going to tell me this is..." And he gets cut off. But, so as Evan's running through these bona fides, all I can think of is like, Blake, this would be a great opportunity for you to realize all the horrible shit that you've put Evan through. And that realization does not cross his mind.
Yes, well... Nobody mentions the whole killing the guy a few chapters ago. I mean, you've got that written here in your notes, and I was just like, that's a very good point. I'm kind of okay with Evan forgetting that's happened, but Blake should not. Blake should feel very bad. So, I mean, surely that's going to come back and bite him in the ass at some point.
I mean, I don't know. Seems like they've conveniently forgotten that Blake got Evan to kill a guy.
If everyone has forgotten and it's just it's not going to emotionally scar Evan or anything, I guess I'm okay with that.
Yeah, you're not rooting for Evan to get emotional damage.
No, exactly.
Sure. Speaking of emotional damage, there's this interesting beat that goes out throughout this chapter where Green Eyes has had basically so much fucked up, horrible situations in her life that she actually has gained a lot of really insightful knowledge from it. Like she's able to kind of diagnose what these goblins were doing by torturing this man.
I mean, I think this is what's so great about Green Eyes' character is how she alternates between being like a really nice and sweet person and someone who's just so casual about incredibly fucked up shit.
Yeah.
Like the way she can sort of pivot a conversation from, just nice playful banter with Evan to, I used to like try and scavenge from these goblins who would do stuff I'm not even comfortable saying to corpses.
Yeah.
So I kind of know how they work. And she's got a couple of other bits later in this chapter, and you're just sort of like, oh god, Green Eyes.
Yeah. It's interesting, but I like that it gives her these unique insights because it lets her diagnose some monstrous stuff, which is Blake is still relatively new to. Like he still doesn't know a lot about different kinds of others, so it's good to have Green Eyes able to explain some of this stuff from a narrative perspective.
And apparently she's an expert on gods. I mean, that one has stuck with me from an arc and a half ago.
Yeah. Another interesting line is Blake talking to Evan and basically telling him, hey, I might not be around forever, so you should be friends with Green Eyes because you two are going to need each other when I'm gone, or just in case, he says, but
Yeah.
Again, not commented on by the rest of the group. This is the kind of line that I would have expected at least Evan to pipe in and say, oh, don't talk like that, we're all going to be okay, or whatever. But doesn't happen.
I guess every 7th arc is the arc of everyone just accepting that Blake's going to die soon. Yeah, you're right. Like, it is a bit weird. I mean, he is not the best at self-care. He kind of had to be forced to go on this, and his body isn't even agreeing with it, but it's weird that nobody is like, oh, Blake, you're going to be fine. We'll fight for you. They're all just kind of like, yeah, that's how you act, I guess.
Yeah, it's weird. I don't know. And even Green Eyes doesn't say anything there, which I would have expected her to as well. Anyway, so after they have finished discussing, their eating of humans, Blake kind of reveals his new plan, which is to fuck with the Behames a bit more.
If you ask me, the new plan is the old plan.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's interesting that this chapter sets up Blake thinking that the Behames are too big for their boots to want to help tangle with Johannes. Like, the idea is, before the Behames will band together with the Duchamps, we gotta knock them down a few pegs so that they actually need to. Which is not correct. Like, this chapter kind of proves, and last chapter with what Alistair was talking about, proves that they already are in a position where they want to band together against Johannes.
Yeah, and I mean, of course they would. If it's now between them and Johannes, like, of course you're not going to have to convince them. That's why I kind of have to assume part of it is just he just wants to take down the Behames.
Yeah, definitely.
We all know that's his jam, and he's basically here, in my opinion, making the decision that he'd rather get everybody versus Johannes than sort of end up in the situation where he's trying to rally everyone against the Behames.
Yeah. And so they head off to try and fuck with some Behames, but before they can, they get intercepted by a gaggle of others. Pizza Revenant.
Is that the collective noun for others?
Yep, a gaggle. Yeah.
Okay.
What else would you call a group of others? Answer some discussion thread.
Yeah. I mean, it could change depending on the other, right? Like, if it was boogeymen, I don't know, it could be a... I don't know. What would you say the one for boogeymen might be?
Boogie Bunch.
Yeah, Boogie Bunch of Boogeymen. I like it.
So yeah, there's Pizza Revenant, the Faceless Woman, and some others. And Pizza Revenant's face looks even more like a pizza because he's been so badly burned last time they met.
I mean, Green Eyes certainly seems to think think so. Like, speaking of our fucked up Green Eyes lines, she just is like, oh man, now I'm hungry again.
Yeah,
and this dude with a burnt face shows up, and it's like, wow, real classy, Green Eyes.
Yeah. And they basically decide to become allies, which is unexpected. Like, it has the vibe as it's happening of, oh, okay, here's the threat for this chapter, let's start the fight, let's do it. And no, they're very reasonable.
Yeah. So obviously the Revenant sort of says, oh, there's no permanent damage to my face, so, it's all good, I'm not really looking to hold a grudge. I kind of latched onto this idea that it's a good thing that he's able to heal, because maybe Blake can heal some more sometime when he gets to slow down. Or is it a sign that the Revenant's just as cavalier about these sorts of things as Blake?
Yeah, I don't know. It's I think it's interesting that the Boogie Bunch that we see here are so readily, like, happy to forgive past grievances and form alliances, which is something that practitioners clearly are not super keen on doing that frequently. Just another little beat of who's the real monster here, I guess.
Yeah, you're right. It feels very different, and that's part of this turn from them all creeping out of the shadows, and you're like, oh, this is real bad, and then it's just immediately like, so yeah, we've been on opposite sides, and that sucks, but these guys are clearly worse, so you just want to team up some,
Yep.
and everyone's just so open, so agreeable. Obviously, the way the chapter ends later, maybe the Abyss is pushing things in that direction. But again, this is packed just because there's an in-universe explanation for why something's happening. It doesn't mean that the rest of the symbolism isn't there.
Yeah.
And I mean, I really like this because karma is something that really emphasizes this sort of eye for an eye revenge type stuff. And so, like, boogeymen kind of directly contradict it right here. The Pizza Revenant in particular. And also, they don't seem to be as selfish, which is another thing karma seems not designed to do, but it does kind of reward all selfish, walled-off behavior. So I just like this idea of not just Blake, but a bunch of boogeymen representing the bad parts of the system through it being their strengths.
Yeah. It's just very interesting to me that the story is so explicitly talking about how easy these boogeymen can make alliances. Like, I mean, it's obviously meant to contrast to what the practitioners are doing, and I love that.
Yeah, way to set a really low fucking bar, practitioners.
Yeah. So here's another interesting line that Evan says. They're talking about the plan, and Evan asks, "We going to assassinate Behames? That'll be a little weirder than anything else tonight, I think. Strangers, okay, but I've been watching Behames and I know their faces." Again, not commented on how okay Evan is with, one, assassinating strangers, and how kind of easy it is to convince him to assassinate people that he's met before and seem to have positive interactions with.
Nobody addresses this. It's like... I was like shaking my screen at this point, being like, somebody say something, because Evan's just sort of like, yeah, I mean, let's kill strangers, no worries. It's like, no. Yeah. I really hope we get Ty back. I feel like Ty is the other person who's bonded with Evan, might be the one to finally call Blake out on what's been happening with Evan.
I mean, I hope so. Yeah, we'll see. So Blake wants to visit Hillsglade House to get more info before he takes down Alistair, but the Boogie Bunch kind of reveal to Blake that Alistair's actually also at the house right now, so they kind of just head over there to, I guess, confront Alistair. They don't really think too much about it. Blake's just kind of like, oh well, let's go to the house anyway.
Well, I got the impression that's actually exactly what Blake was hoping for and banking on. He wants to tackle the Behames, but he's not actually looking to just assassinate as many Behames as he can. Surprisingly. His thing is he wants to take away their source of power, which is whatever Alistair's connection to it is. So I think finding Alistair was actually the whole goal.
I see.
Just kind of like, that's why they're like, oh, but Alistair's at the house. And Blake's kind of like, yeah, perfect.
Two birds, one stone. I don't want to harp on this too much, but Green Eyes is just a great addition to this team, right? Like, she's consistently great throughout this entire chapter.
Yeah, I mean, so is Evan, and Green Eyes and Evan also now have absolutely fantastic chemistry. Like they're working off each other very well, comedically. Like the whole bit with the pregnant rat versus the fighting game, and Evan just sort of being like, "Okay, yep, that'll do." So yeah, and like it's just that they're both hilarious in and of themselves, and they're working off of each other very well. It is very good.
Yeah, they have great chemistry. You're right. They both interact because, well, actually, maybe this is something to be worried about. They both kind of have this, or Green Eyes especially has this innocent but then sometimes monstrous vibe, and maybe that's what Evan is tending towards with this mostly innocent but then sometimes just murders people. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, like some people have commented since Blake first lent him some of his own spirits that Evan has a bit of abyss in him. So, and he obviously still has this connection to Blake. I'm wondering at what point maybe we should just start to consider Evan part boogeyman. Hopefully that's a reversible condition for him at least.
Yeah, we'll see. And okay, here's another thing. The Pizza Revenant is talking about, they're talking about, human flesh and all that good stuff, bonding over it. And the Pizza Revenant says, if it's not recognizable as human after the fact, and you can leave it by the side of the road for a cleanup crew, there's something to be said for that. Kind of talking about how easy it is to dispose of bodies sometimes. And it just made me think, Blake is so gung-ho on killing all the monsters, but these monsters are clearly monstrous, even if they're being nice to him right now. It's kind of like, if the monsters are humans, I'll kill them. If the monsters are, like, monsters, then they're fine.
So, I mean, like, sure. I guess, there's something to be said for that attitude, because humans are kind of the top dog making a lot of decisions in a lot of places. I don't know, like, you can kill a few, Duchamp husbands and bring down an entire system. If you try to take out these boogeyman others, what's that really going to achieve?
Yeah.
So it could be a sort of picking your targets type thing. That's a pretty flimsy justification for murdering humans and stuff, though. Like, I'm not trying to say that makes it okay, but interestingly, these guys do seem nicer than half of the Duchamp husbands he killed. Maybe that's a circumstances thing.
Yeah.
But yeah. I mean, I just kind of liked from this bit how Blake just sort of naturally assumed that the corpse was his responsibility now. It's that classic, like, this felt like quintessential Blake with his whole, like, not wanting to have debts thing.
Yeah,
how definitely. He's sort of just like, this feels like I don't even think when he phrases it, he necessarily meant, karmically, this is mine now. He was just kind of like, this is my responsibility, and almost doesn't distinguish the two in this case. I don't know. I just really liked it.
Yeah, it's good. It is very. You're right. I didn't kind of think of it as especially Blakeish, but it does tie back to his desperation not to have any debt to anybody.
Yeah. He always wanted to feel like he was in balance with the universe, and he's sort of doing that here. And then so I guess the next thing is, as he starts to get to the house, he comments on how this scene is an inversion of things. When Ross came in 1.1 for the inheritance, his family is standing united, kind of opposite him. His friends are here, but they're also opposite him. He's brought a bunch of new friends. He's obviously a monster now. It's just It's a cool thing to include in this opening chapter, because we haven't seen most of these people for quite a while. Like the most recent ones we've seen are Rose and Alistair was in like 13.1, and it's like a nice way to sort of give us a glimpse as to where they all are big picture wise. Like they're all clearly standing together.
Yeah,
and it's a really nice way to sort of give us that insight, and sort of have it tied to Blake and how different he is from the last time he did something like this. Yeah,
especially for the now awakened Thorburns, who obviously never interacted with Rose post being awakened. It's a great way to immediately set up, yep, they're here and they're on Team Thorburn with the rest of the Cabal, right? They're part of the group.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, we haven't seen most of these people for presumably hours.
Yeah.
Like the Cabal, even Alistair and Rose. Presumably they've all been talking a fair bit.
You would think, yeah.
So it's sort of a way to give us the impression right away that they've all come together to some extent.
Yeah. So Blake and Alistair start to do their little word dance. Before Blake does something pretty unexpected. He's basically completely transparent with Blake and literally puts all his power in Blake's hands as a way to force Blake to slow down and think about things rather than just be the mindless fighting monster that he wants to be.
I really love Alistair as an enemy of Blake. They play off each other so well.
Yeah, he's great.
Like I love how Alistair's opening line here is about how Blake's timing is convenient, which timing, of course, he's a Bahame. But Blake's response is just, "Yep, that's me. I'm Blake, the inconvenience." And then from there, Alistair goes into this huge villain monologue where he just pegs Blake, like he nails him to a T.
Yeah, perfectly.
With this description of like who Blake is or what Blake is.
Yeah, this way that he uses this knowledge of Blake being this warrior spirit, the warrior half, right? And from that, completely predicts that Blake is going to come after him next, because of course he will, because he needs a target to be facing, and he's not ready to face Johannes yet. And then uses that, and uses what he must know of his psychology to just be like, this will force him to actually stop and have to think, and then once he thinks, he will agree with me because I know I'm right. And it works perfectly. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, this is why he's so fun as a villain, because he can kind of predict the future, but he's also just good at reading people, so he can put that to good use because he knows what questions to ask. And he plays into the theatrics of it all so well. Like, obviously, we get to the bit in it soon where that he predicts there'll be the earthquake in 40 seconds, but he doesn't say it's going to be that. He's just like, we will get a sign, some sort of signal in 40 seconds, and then just leaves everyone to fucking stew for 40 seconds, which would be an insanely long 40 seconds in this situation. And then obviously, like, the other great theatrics bit is just how, like, Blake keeps making comments like, I'm here to drain the Bahame's power, and Alistair's just like, oh, that's good, and doesn't elaborate at all.
It's such not only is it correct and in line with what Alistair's planning to do, it's such a great way to throw Blake off of his game. Like, we know Alistair's plan here is to make Blake think, right? Make Blake have to think. And so throwing him off of his game like this is the way to do that. It's so perfect.
Oh, and also, I mean, it plays on us, the audience. Like, we know that Alistair's plan is going to be to use up all the power for this thing. The story's kind of having fun with some dramatic irony, in that we kind of know where Alistair's going with this, and Blake is just confused. And, Blake's done that to us so many times. I don't feel bad for him. I was just enjoying the dramatic irony of all this.
Yeah, it serves him right, to be honest. So I kind of feel like now Alistair has earned the title of Lord of Jacob's Bell. Like, of all the possible candidates, he is the only one who seems to be somewhat altruistic. Like, he's clever, he's powerful, and he actually seems to give a shit about people that aren't just the Bahames and the Duchamps. Yeah, obviously, let's give it a bit more time and see, but I don't know. I'm on board so far.
You're right. I've been struggling with this since the last chapter when he revealed this plan to Podrick and friends. He seems to not be the worst. As we've already talked about, the exceptionally low bars practitioners have been setting in this story. But Alistair at this stage doesn't seem like he'd be the worst Lord, actually.
Yeah.
Although, he's such a dick. Like, just as an individual, like, he manages to slip in when he's talking about the ring, how he's the first Bahame to be able to wear it on his ring finger because all the others have been too overweight. And it's such an unnecessary, like, he cuts himself off from it because it has no relevance to anything else he's talking about. But he just couldn't help but slip it in there that, I'm the first not fat Bahame leader in quite a while, which is just like, what?
I mean,
What's that matter?
the reason he says it is because in his mind, he's the chosen one, right? Like, that's an important thing to remember for Alistair's character, is he thinks that this ring is made for him. And look, it fits me where it hasn't fit all the other Behemoths. I must be the chosen one.
I agree, but it's just...
it's such a dick move.
he'd be one of those... If he is the best candidate for leader, you put him in leadership, and then I just would never want to be in direct contact with him again.
Yeah. Let him do that stuff and we'll go do other stuff. So, quick intermission, from the Alistair love here. There's this one bit where the faceless woman just starts combing Green Eyes' hair, and it's so weird, and it's like both hilarious and terrifying. I don't know what the fuck's going on with it.
Boogeyman just being cute moments, they work so well for me. They always seem to pick the most insane moments to just start doing mundane things like this. Like, you can totally see it from the faceless woman's point of view. She's like, man, things have really sort of slowed down. These guys are just having a chat. I'm bored. I'm just going to start combing this girl's hair. She really needs it. It's so... Yeah, I don't think I'd ever get sick of this stuff. This is fantastic.
Yeah, it feels like an extension of how Blake and Green Eyes always seem to be talking about relationship drama during their fight scenes.
No, exactly. It feels like the same sort of thing as that. Absolutely.
One more interesting line from this bit, I think. Rose says to Alistair, after Alistair passes her the ring to throw to Blake, Rose says, "You trust him more than I do," which is... It's to Alistair, and Blake suspects that that's not meant to be... He's not meant to hear that. It's just an interesting line. Like, the fact that Rose... Okay, we know Rose doesn't trust Blake a lot, but Alistair does trust him more than Rose? Like, it just seems so weird.
I don't know. Trusting him more than Rose probably isn't a high bar.
Sure.
But it is interesting because, I went back and skimmed 13.1 just to make sure I was remembering right, and, Rose and Blake... got on pretty well.
Yeah.
In that before Blake accidentally stabbed Alistair a bit and things went south.
Yeah. Classic problems.
As you do. But they were making really good progress. They were basically, when he stabbed Alistair, they were in the process of making that deal where Blake would be sealed and just sort of go with Alexis, assuming she agreed to it. So it does to me feel that maybe something has changed a bit since then. I don't know if Rose maybe was just found it easier to be nicer to Blake because the situation was so stacked against him, or whether maybe since then she's learnt more. Obviously she's conferred with the Cabal and the other Thorburns in the last few hours. Maybe all the stories they told her of what Blake has been up to turned her against him even more. I don't know, but it does seem like she's even less on Blake's side than she was an arc ago. And
yeah.
It looks like we're all going to be on the same team moving forward, so I can't wait to kind of see this continue to evolve.
It might just be that she left Blake to keep everyone safe at the house, and now we're back at the house, and it's obviously been burned and flooded, and suddenly the rest of the Thorburns are all awakened, and all this shit's happened. Callan's dead, so much stuff that Rose was kind of Blake, I left you in charge here. What the fuck?
I mean, he kind of admitted to most of that in 13.1, actually.
He
true. Told her Callan died. And also, I guess I'd be interested to hear what the others said, but I feel like if I was there, and having seen it from Blake's point of view, I would have come out for it and be like, you don't really need to hold too much of this against Blake. We did everything we fucking could.
Yeah.
There were some questionable decisions being made, but I don't know what else they're expected to do.
The one sentence summary of, and then Blake, took us down into the abyss for a bit, but it's fine. If I was Rose, I'd be like,
That's very fair, yeah.
Anyway, some clowns almost killed Catherine, some guy almost threw Roxanne out a window, but we're all good, it's all good. Anyway, so Alistair gives Blake the ring that allows him to access the Behemoth Well of Power, and tells Blake his plan and says to Blake, hey, if we don't carry this out, this is what's going to happen. Jacob's Bell is going to fall into the abyss, and with the ring in Blake's hand, he is forced to agree that Alistair's in the right, and so he gives back the ring.
And I love this just from a purely practitioner standpoint, how he gives Blake the power and makes him make this decision. Like, you can totally see how in the spirit's mind this makes it weigh so much more. Like it's basically exactly what happened with Blake and Mason McCullough, the good karma guy, where that guy was like, if you think it's right, stab me as much as you want, and but I'm betting it's fine. It turns out he was wrong, and this is kind of what Alistair's doing here. He's so sure that Blake will see that what needs to happen is right, that he can give Blake the ring and know he's going to get it back, and that's clearly going to give him some power over Blake, I think.
Yeah. It's a good play. I'm glad it works out for Alistair where it didn't work out for Mason.
I like how Alistair frames it as the tide is too much with Blake, so he just wants to swim laterally rather than trying to fight against it. Like
it's perfect. It's a perfect play.
Yeah, it really is. And so then obviously I think the realization we get from this sort of segment as shit starts to go down is, so it looks like the Abyss is the puppeteer that Podrick was talking about last chapter. And I mean, I think this is one of my first guesses. Like, it does make a lot of sense. It's something that has been talked about since Blake first got out in Arc 10, is that the Abyss loves to cause chaos through the boogeymen. And, well, I mean, look at Jacob's Bell. Mission fucking accomplished thanks to Blake and some of the others. It does kind of seem like Blake's the center of it, which is maybe why he's become the center of this downward dip. I mean, he really shouldn't have taken a second trip to the Abyss. He set up a whole 3-beat. This was a huge mistake.
So, does this mean that you think the Abyss is sentient?
I think we've known for a while now that it has some sort of intelligence.
Yeah.
I fought against that a lot in Arc 9 from memory. Like, I think you kept sort of trying to convince me that it maybe has some, and I kept saying no. And then definitely towards the end of there and afterwards, like I've come to see, like, it definitely does seem to have some kind of intelligence or basic will, at least. I don't know how much it might be above, say, a big spirit, but it's definitely got its own motivations and some sort of intelligence to help push people in the directions that serve that.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. There's an interesting bit here where Alexis mouths words at Blake, and he thinks, I suspected I knew what they were. I want to hear what you think they are, Elliot.
I'm assuming it might be an I'm sorry. That was my first guess.
Yeah.
I haven't come up with anything better. You could throw a cut ties in there for good luck. Not really relevant. Probably bad advice in Pact too, especially when we're trying to keep him out of the Abyss.
Yeah, cut ties means go back down to the Abyss.
But no, I'm assuming it's I'm sorry. I don't know. I'm hoping there's such a long list of people I want Blake to have conversations with next chapter as we start planning as a group, because every member of the Cabal, every member of the Thorburn family, more Alistair, obviously Rose. Like this whole arc could just be Blake catching up with everyone again, and I'd be completely fine with it. A
good way to spend your bonus day is just chit chat with everybody. So I think we should touch on a little bit more how great of a plan this was by Alistair. Like, he so effectively got Blake from, let's kill Alistair, to, okay, let's help Alistair. Like, it's a complete turnaround, and it's so perfectly executed.
I mean, obviously, part of that was that part of his plan was already to spend all the Bahame power, which we're still not talking about how ludicrously insane that is. But, you're right. He played this so well. And now I guess we're going to be fighting Johannes. Like, that seems to be what they imply, I think, at the end of the chapter. Like, the way it's phrased at the end, it's not, let's stop the Abyss. I guess this is Alistair's whole moving laterally thing. He just wants to make sure Johannes goes down. And I don't know. Like, because I think it'd be easier to get Johannes on side to fight the Abyss than the other way around. Or, the Abyss probably needs to be stopped more than Johannes even. Can't believe I'm taking Johannes' side on something. But, like, obviously they seem to imply that Johannes would be safe from everything falling into the Abyss because of his domain.
Yeah.
But we talked a bunch when we met Crooked Hat last arc about how domains can end up in there too. So maybe... I don't know. I wouldn't have worked off the assumption that Johannes is particularly safe if a whole town and everyone else's domains is going to slip through.
Yeah, it's interesting that Johannes is set up as being safe. Like, I don't know what to think of that.
maybe it's just because his domain is so big that it like it won't count in the area that's been affected by Blake and the Abyss. I don't know.
Yes, I'm kind of thinking about like the thing that will protect Jacob's Bell is the innocents still staying in the town. Right?
Yeah.
And
You're
maybe
right.
there's
if he
something.
can stop the innocents from leaving his domain, which he probably
Yeah.
has some ability to do, maybe that helps him.
Or the fact that the North End does seem to be the more like developed part of town. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I just like I wouldn't have thought the way this chapter ends that the next item of business would be fighting Johannes. I would assume the next item of business is how do we stop this whole place going to the Abyss?
Yeah, I suspect they're, or at least Alistair thinks they're more linked, because we do talk about how Johannes is either helping this along or leveraging it, and so it's kind of you can't do one without the other.
Yeah. I mean, I was working off the assumption that Johannes was just going to keep playing his game of, hey, look at my big domain. I'm just going to chill out in here. You guys kill the fuck out of each other for me, please.
Yeah,
because it's been working pretty damn well for him so far.
Yeah, so far it's a good plan. I guess we'll see how it unfolds throughout the rest of Sine Die.
Yes, but obviously that's the end of 14.1, and so just before we hop out of your ears, we're going to talk about the discussion question that's gone on for the last week.
Yep. So to remind you, that discussion question was, should Blake be proud of the way he handled the Duchamps?
Yes. And so our first and most thought-provoking answer that we got comes from Doof's own Matt Freeman, who responded, the people he murdered were practitioners, so yes.
Yep.
So, what to think about from that one.
Thanks. Can we... I want to pull out an answer by Brawl97, who does something that a few listeners did and broke it down into a few different perspectives. So Brawl97 broke it down into the spiritual perspective, which is that he's been shat on by the Duchamps for so long that it's good that he gets a little bit of comeuppance. And the human perspective, where these people were horrible, and so it's kind of fine that Blake killed them. The one that they let get away was arguably one of the worst, who enslaved mentally people. Yeah. So that's pretty bad.
Yeah. No, I mean, that makes sense. I definitely agreed with Brawl97 from that whole spiritual perspective. Like, they mentioned, if we're the spirits and stuff, like, there was definitely a cathartic sense to some of the points where Blake just fucked up the universe back a bit. So I completely agreed. Like, from a sort of spirit perspective, I was like, yeah, this was fucking cool. The human's perspective is obviously a bit more like, but should we have done it? And yeah, I don't know. Like, I guess we'd have to go back and sort of look at all of them. But, like, I think you could argue that letting one of the worst ones get away, does that kind of undermine what he did?
Yeah.
Like he took out the middle of the pack. He didn't take out the worst of the worst. I don't know.
Yeah. Interestingly, Brawl97 also kind of came back to this answer the next chapter and was kind of like, seeing the collateral damage that happened in 13.x, it changed to a soft no, just because it was a little bit too much to be fully comfortable with.
Yeah, I mean, that's Corviday's fault, though. That's not Blake's.
Well,
although
sure.
It'd be interesting to see how Blake thinks about that.
Yeah, Blake kind of created the conditions for that to happen anyway, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, he also let Corviday out, so sure. But,
Yeah.
I think we've talked about whether or not you should be blamed for Corviday-isms in the past.
Yeah.
And I think it depends exactly. But, like, Blake tried to leave it in a situation that was going to work out very well for everyone before Corviday got involved. But this does kind of leap into Juanson's answer, where Juanson talked about how Blake probably shouldn't feel that proud, or maybe not even that unproud. Like, it's just, there was some good done here, there was some bad stuff, but the dominoes haven't all fallen yet. And I sort of I like this whole angle of viewing it, and it's like you shouldn't just pick a decision. Like, you can't just be proud of it and you're going to stick by those guns forever. Like, you kind of look at what all the fallout is from your actions and reevaluate whether or not it's a good thing as it continues to unfold. So maybe, yes, like if he was still there when Sandra calmed everyone down, he could have been proud of it then. And then when Corviday blew it all to shit, maybe that's when you're like, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't have done this.
Yeah. I think something else I liked that Wanson touched on, which not that many other people touched on, was some of these practitioners, we don't know that they deserve to die. Like, some of them, I'm comfortable saying, yes, this person deserved to die. But some of them, like the Pyromancer brothers, right, and Mason McCullough, like, did they deserve to die? We don't really know what their crimes were.
Yeah, like, I don't know how convincingly we pass the threshold of reasonable doubt to borrow, like, the legal definition.
Yeah.
There was definitely not, like, Mason McCullough's instance, there was no evidence that he'd done anything wrong. There were lots of suspicions, but I feel like that kill was almost just because he had tons of good karma and Blake ain't about that.
Exactly, right? Like, okay, there were 6 kills, and I reckon 3 of them you could say, yes, capital punishment is okay for this one.
Yeah, just I'd have to go back and look, but like, I think you're right. There's a couple where it's just sort of like, are we judge, jury, executionering a bit here? Yeah.
Yeah. So, who else had a good answer? Let's touch on... here's one. So Hyberman kind of points out that it could have been a lot worse, which I guess is a good defense. Blake did give most of them a chance to kind of repent or defend themselves, especially in the first half. He kind of lost that a bit later on. But, yeah, so could have been worse. So, yes.
Yeah, I mean, Cyberman 7 really focused on this last moment where he basically gave the Duchamps an out. And, well, he was just like, stop being fuckwits and we can end this.
Yeah.
And, basically, as the spirits kind of agreed, when he did this and they sort of refused, that's definitely when Blake got the spiritual and arguably the moral high ground. Because those two things are separate, usually. And so, yeah, I mean, as Sir Hyberman 7 said, it wasn't perfect, but, extenuating circumstances, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think one of the other ones that I really liked was David L. Hunt popped in to just sort of mention that Blake needs to treat Evan better before he can be proud of anything.
Yeah.
Which,
yes.
Like, yep, hard to argue with that logic.
Yeah. Something I guess I want to touch on here is the wording of the question was kind of intentional. It's not just, did Blake do the right thing? It's, should Blake be proud of this, right?
Yeah.
And I maybe was a little unnerved by the amount of people that were like, yes, be proud of these murders, Blake. Be proud of them. I don't know.
Yeah. I guess it's interesting because it's hard to argue with some of the positive results that this may have ended up with. Although I guess we'll see. Corvidae has come in to interfere. But it does kind of feel like maybe there could have been other ways. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not comfortable necessarily just jumping on and being like, yeah, you should be proud that you killed these people. But I mean, it's hard to argue with some of it.
Yeah. I definitely think points have been made to sway me to think, yes, this was the right thing to do with a lowercase r. I don't know. Proud of it? Ooh.
Yeah, I think one interesting thing, this is kind of a bit of a tangent from what you were just talking about, but Beard of Valor wrote in an answer that I just want to bring up because they kind of talked about how Blake, something they sort of talked around is Blake has kind of demonstrated here a way to use the system against itself. Like particularly the way he finished the Sandra right at the end. He played into the system to undermine it. And that's something we've seen a lot of people talk about, but not necessarily follow through on. So maybe part of this will come down to where Blake goes from here.
Yeah, interesting. I guess we will see. You're right that this was Blake using the system for his own gains. I don't know. I think something from last chapter that stood out was Blake being like, there was that little monologue where he was like, yeah, maybe I will use the system, whatever. At the end, I'll just be Blake. And it's kind of like, no, Blake, you want to fight the system. Don't just compromise. Don't just say, yeah, maybe I will use it. Like, that's a step down the wrong path.
Yeah, well, or maybe it's not, based on how the second half of Arc 13 went.
Well, yeah, true. Maybe it's the right decision. Or, but that's so weird to say because it's like, okay, maybe it was right to play within the system. Wait, but actually what you ended up doing was just murdering a bunch of people, especially the ones in the second half who were the less morally justifiable ones to kill, right? It started out with Blake killing the most reprehensible ones. And
yeah.
yeah.
I think I'm starting to sit more and more on team wait and see what happens, because I also feel like that'll be us. That'll give us an opportunity to see what Pact might have to say about this. Like, I feel like the way Corvidae has kind of ruined any of the goodness of what Blake did is probably a hint that the story doesn't necessarily agree that what Blake did here was correct.
Yeah.
And we'll probably get more of that moving forward.
And if Blake's goal was, okay, yes, I want to use the system for the greater good, like, hey, maybe the Duchamps would have helped band against Jacob's Bell sinking into the abyss, and maybe the lack of, 1/3 of the town's power now is going to mean that is a much harder battle. Like, I don't know. It kind of feels like he played within the system, and all that really ended up happening was he's aided the abyss.
Yes. It's going to be very interesting to see more of where the Abyss comes into it. Because you're right, that's another angle 13.x took to maybe undermine Blake's position here, is saying that the Abyss might have been giving him a boost and playing this.
Yeah. And we'll see, I guess, throughout the rest of Sine Die Arc 14. So, of course, now that this discussion question is over, and thank you for your lovely answers, folks, we have a new discussion question. We're going to step away from the ethics a little bit, take a bit of a break on that one. And this discussion question is another nice little world-building, theory-crafting kind of discussion question. And that is, what other places, real or fictional, might have sunk into the abyss?
And so, I mean, obviously, I don't know, because if something like Jacob's Bell falls into the abyss, does it just disappear from written memory? Or, like I guess, Atlantis is the first one that sort of jumps to my mind when we ask this. And maybe even Maggie's old hometown. Like, we don't know what happened there, but I can't imagine it has many connections left.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I'm interested to hear of other people's ideas of what sort of places could have fallen apart like Jacob's Bell is and ending up in the abyss.
Yeah. So leave your answers to that discussion question in our discussion threads, which you can find linked down in the episode description down below.
Yes. The other place we can also be found is on Twitter, @MediumD Podcast. With the holiday season sort of coming up, our recording schedule is accelerating a bit ahead of the chapters we'll be releasing. So there's sort of an updated live reads schedule. I'm going to keep doing the live reads, but they're going to be way out of time with the episodes for about the next month and a bit. So, you can keep up to that on Twitter. Also, doofmedia.com/calendar has all of the entries in there.
Yep. While you're on doofmedia.com, why don't you check out some of the other great shows on the Doof Media Network? It's been Thanksgiving, so it's been a little light while our American friends take some time off, like the slackers that they are. But we're starting to get back into the podcast season. There'll be a new episode of What You Say coming out tomorrow.
Yes. And, Doof also has a bunch of stuff that is in our Discord, which is available via patreon.com/doofmedia. So for just $1 a month, you'll get on there. Something that's on there is Behamebot, which is a bot that tells you even more information than the Doof calendar on doofmedia.com. Or not more information, just better information that isn't limited by Google Calendar.
Yep.
And, it also has a Doofcraft server on there,
yeah,
which is what we call Minecraft that's Doof flavored.
Yeah, I used to say that the best perk of being a patron at any level was the Discord, but now it's the Minecraft server. So it's the Discord has been unseated. If you want to get access to all this stuff, you can go to www.patreon.com/doofmedia.
Yes, and there is www.patreon.com/Wildbow as well. And if you go there, Wildbow won't sink into the abyss because you'll have connections to all his lovely Patreons.
Yep, financial connections, the best kind. So make sure you support Wildbow, and we'll see you soon for the next episode, Sine Die 14.2, on Wednesday, the 4th of December. So we will see you then.
See ya.